All right. Welcome back to the Beyond Coaching podcast. Today we've got Coach Walt, head coach of Wilmington Weightlifting Club. He wrestled from age 4 through college, fell into CrossFit in '07, got handed a team after Masters Nationals, and in 2016 opened his own gym. He now coaches 50 to 60 athletes, individualized programs, and spends weekends on camps, courses, and meets. Today, we're digging into custom versus template reality, what to actually track, youth to masters programming, and some spicy takes on USAW and talent development. Walt, welcome to the podcast, man.
Thanks for having me, guys. Looking forward to it.
Absolutely, man. One of the things, you showed me some of the data that you guys track. What data points are the most important to you when it comes to coaching weightlifting?
So the three that I feel are the ones that I get the most bang for the buck on are going to be your volume, your average relative intensity, and the tonnage over the course of the training blocks, so the week, the day, and over the course of the training cycle.
When did you get that point? When did you decide that those are the most important metrics to you?
Oh boy, that's when. I don't know exactly when. I mean, it's been a while, years. But I mean, I can't remember exactly when. When I first started, coaching, it was just kind of, just started seeing people get kind of run down and stuff like that. And at one point, I was just kind of counting sets, and that was kind of like how I originally did it, like how many sets we're doing in a training cycle. But then with that, realizing the variation between athletes, men and women, younger and older, bigger and smaller, I realized that doesn't encompass everything. So as the team grew and became more diverse, I had to figure out some different ways to track these things individualized. And it probably, honestly, it was probably just from conversations with other coaches at meets and seeing what they were doing and talking to them and picking their brains. That's kind of, the way that it kind of came down to that. I felt like those were the most important ones.
Nice. How do you use each one of those metrics to drive progress, like to drive your coaching?
So the way that I look at it is, obviously when we're looking at getting an adaptation, we have to have a minimum effective dose, but we can't exceed their maximum recoverable volume. Right. So we can't run them into the dirt and get them hurt, but we have to give them enough to get them something in order to adapt. So that being said, what I'm doing is I'm assessing the program over the course of or assessing those variables over the course of the entire program. I also will track with the athletes, the stress levels and nutrition, stuff like that, depending on the higher ones. But it gives me an idea. So at the end of that training cycle, if we're seeing that we're getting the adaptation that we wanted, hey, great. Now I can adjust things slightly in order to try to get a little bit more of an adaptation, because you can't really, unless it's a huge adaptation, then you keep everything relatively the same. But if you're not getting an adaptation, I have to decide what variable am I going to change in order to break through a plateau, right? So by looking at that training cycle, I could then say, okay, this is what I planned for the athlete to do, and this is what they actually did. And as long as those numbers are pretty close. So if I planned for you to do this much volume and you had some days where you're sick or you only did this much, then, we don't really know if the problem was the program or the implementation of the program. But if everything looks pretty close and we're getting to a plateau, then I'm aware that, okay, something has to change in order for us to break through that. And I only want to make small changes over time, because once we get to a certain volume or a certain intensity, you can't go backward and expect to get a better adaptation or any adaptation at all. So you have to keep progressing it. So tracking those things over time with an athlete when you're looking at long-term athletic development is crucial to be able to continue to get those adaptations in that athlete when things are kind of starting to hit that plateau or not progressing the way that you expected or anticipated them to.
Right. Where do you feel like most coaches kind of go wrong with tracking, or let's say you got a new coach too, who's maybe not sure what to do and they're tracking maybe nothing or maybe too much, or where would your recommendation be if you have hey, here's what I would do to start off for somebody who's not doing anything?
Well, one, I would tell them not to get lost in the weeds, because there's so much different things with data that you can do that you can get kind of obsessed with it. And when you're developing athletes, you still have to worry about the what I'll call blending the art with the science. And I didn't coin that, but so it's what are we doing in order to help them continue to learn and improve the movement pattern? And then what are we doing to make sure that they're getting the proper stimulus to adapt physically? Right. So with that, it's with a newer coach, it would be make sure that what you're doing is you're getting the movement pattern to to improve, right? That's the biggest thing with a young coach that's learning
Yeah.
it, and then have them just start, maybe when it comes to tracking, just some of the basic things, like, making sure that they're understanding, what the intensities are that they're programming for somebody, so that they're not running them into the dirt, right? And also make sure that they're the tracking, say, like volume. I mean, they can do that by reps, they can do that by sets, they can do that some different ways, but just to have an idea on what your athlete is doing, so that you're starting to build that base of knowledge, find out what's important to you, as you
Yeah.
start tracking more and more data points.
Nice. I always felt
Definitely.
like my journey through the tracking and the data stuff was like, I knew how to like write a good program in principle, and I would write these programs and we'd do them. And you can kind of, training is such a gray area, right? Like you can kind of like, you can be good, better, or best. And like good will work for a long time. And that might be all you ever get out of training is like, I did a bunch of good programs, but I never quite did like a bunch of great programs. And so for me, I always thought of it as like, it's like nutrition. Like as soon as you start writing down what you're doing, it just becomes so much more obvious. Like, oh crap, I thought we were training really heavy, but we're like at like 80% all the time. Or I thought we were training really light, but actually like the average weight is like, 87. And so like for me, it was just like instantly a clear picture of like, oh, I get where I'm at. If I want to move this needle a little bit to the right and move everything a little heavier, I don't need to do a ton of stuff. I don't need to throw a bunch of heavy sets of singles and all this. I can just kind of, hey, let's move some volume over this way to the right or left. And that was like really, really like big for me. It's kind of almost eye opening because it was like, as soon as I had a picture, I was like, oh man, like I get where I'm at. I like this girl does this much, this guy does that much. Was there a moment for you where you kind of like got to that system of like, hey, now I see the like the matrix, right? Like now I see the matrix. I get like where all the details are, what I need to do. And then like, you kind of hone in on any one particular detail, like this thing, when I move this, it makes a difference. Like, was there ever a time where you kind of had that epiphany, or did it just evolve over time?
Well, one, I'll say I love your analogy with nutrition, because I think a lot of people
Well,
will be able to relate to that one.
that's why I'm here.
But I think it's a great one, because it's like, you'd be like, oh, I'm getting enough protein. Well, track how much protein you're getting. Oh yeah, I'm not getting enough protein. Like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm eating low fat. How much fat? Oh, no, I'm eating too much fat, or too many, like whatever. So that's I think that's a perfect analogy. And then when you're tracking it and you're actually taking a look at it, it kind of does paint the whole picture and keeps you better within the parameters that where you need to be. As far as an epiphany moment, I don't. It was probably something with. I can't think of anything specific, but where it really started becoming more evident was through conversations with Travis, Coach Travis Cooper, and
Yep.
in conversations with him, he's an engineer. He's got his degree in engineering from Georgia Tech, so he's really a big numbers guy, and loves that stuff, and incredibly intelligent with it. So just a lot of discussions with him kind of like pushed me and nudged me to start looking a little bit more into those type of things. But like you said, like sometimes you don't even need to give it a nudge to have something change.
Right.
So if we're talking about somebody that's a newer lifter, just by them making big gains right off the bat, like I had a young lady, she's been lifting for a little while, but she just completed her first training cycle with me, and she PR'd over the course of that first training cycle. She added, I think it was 8 kilograms to her snatch and 5 kilograms to her clean and jerk. So that alone, now, even with keeping the average relative intensity and the volume the same, the tonnage has gone up, right? Because now every rep is off of a bigger number. So now, like, she's doing more tonnage every week than what she was doing previously, just by keeping the other numbers the same. So it is like, what becomes interesting is seeing how those numbers play. I think for a newer coach, again, seeing how those numbers play into each other. Right. And it's like you change one and then the other two change, right? Or they could change just naturally, just by the athlete having their progression and development.
Fine. I got a question for you, Walt. One of the things that you mentioned to me on our previous call was that you figured out the coaching cheat code.
Oh yeah.
What did you mean by that?
Well, my wife won't listen to this, so it doesn't matter. So she doesn't listen to anything that I do with weightlifting. But yeah, so the way that I explain that is that, like, like, I got lots of friends, that are my age, a little younger, a little older, whatever. And they complain, they'll inform me on how their wives complain or don't like about how much time they're spending on the golf course or playing video games or doing other things. Well, like for me, I figured out the cheat code because I took what my passion was, which was weightlifting and programming and athlete development, working with athletes, and I made it my job. Right. So now if there's ever a time when my wife is like, she can't, well, she doesn't, but I mean, like, it's like, oh, baby, I got to work again this weekend. I got this meet that I got to go to. We're doing a training camp this weekend. Oh man, I got another level one I got to coach. And so, it's my job.
I love that.
I can't really get any complaints about it because it's what brings home the bacon. Right. So I get to
Yeah.
do what I'm passionate about, what I love. And I don't have to deal with the grief that I probably would have if I decided to become like a golf pro on the side or something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on this? Max and I have talked about this too. Like, there's this idea of whether it's social media or whatever, a lot of people saying like always, oh, make your passion your job, make your passion your career. But the problem is a lot of times that can almost ruin the passion for people. How have you stayed passionate through this?
Well, I don't really know how that would ruin it. You know what I mean? Like from my perspective. Yeah. I mean, if anything, it's intensified the passion for me. Right. So I don't really kind of relate to, and or maybe I would say like,
Yeah.
maybe it's not really what they were passionate about or that they thought they were going to be passionate about it. But then you get into like when you're young, sometimes, you're going to school and you're like, hey, I want to be this. I want to be a chemist. And then you go to college, you start taking chemistry classes and you're like, not really, that this isn't really what I want to do. So then you kind of revert and change course. But like, I think if it is something that you're truly passionate about, and then once you find out what the deeper layers are with it, I think that is like kind of, I guess you can compare it to the Dunning-Kruger effect, right? The more, the more you know, the more you realize you don't know. So, but if you reverse that, if you have somebody that really thinks that this is what they love, then they find out more about it, they might realize, hey, this isn't really what it is, my thing. But if it is your thing, I think that's absolutely what you should be chasing, because I think no matter what you're doing, right, if you're passionate about it and you love it, not only is that saying true that, when you go to work, you never work a day in your life, but I also feel like, if you're one of the best or the best at what you're doing, you're going to be able to make a living at it. Right. So, I mean, if you're, one of the analogies I say to the kids is like, if you're passionate about like trash disposal, right, and you get a job working for the trash company, and you become the best at that, and you work your way up the ladder, these companies that these guys that run these trash companies, they're making bank, like, so if that's what you're passionate about, go ahead and chase it. And no matter what that is, there's going to be an avenue to make a living and to support yourself. And, we sleep if we're sleeping 8 hours a day, right? We sleep a third of our life. If we're working 8 hours a day, we're working a third of our life. And then, you could say the other third is to yourself, but some of that's just getting ready for work, coming home from work, getting ready for bed, waking up. So it's like you have less than a third of your life that you can do things that you enjoy. Right. So for me, my philosophy is like, I want to do what I love as much as possible. Right. So that's why turning my passion into my career has really brought my overall level of happiness, much higher than what I was doing prior.
Nice. Do you think a lot of people get into it and like they get into it as an athlete, they end up as a coach, and then maybe they're trying to get something out of it that's like adjacent to the sport? Like you're obviously super passionate, you love lifting, you love all there is about lifting and discovery and all this stuff. Do you find that like, or do you feel like there's a bit of in the sport now, people kind of coming in and using the sport more as a vehicle to become, to make money or to have a business or to maybe get a little bit of like sort of fame or ego boost versus like people that come in, they're like, I love snatch and clean and jerk. And it's just like, I can't get enough of that. I watch it all the time. Like I'm into it. But these people maybe kind of are on the outside of that. Do you feel like that's happening more now because it's become more popular?
I mean, I feel like it's always kind of happened, within the sport that there are those people that come in and, whatever, they're a flash in the pan. They might not, they might not realize what the whole intention is, and they might not be as invested in coaching. And yeah, I mean, those people, I don't know if it's more or less, but I think they're maybe more visible now with social media
Yeah.
than what they were in the past, but I still feel like there's a lot of young coaches that are real passionate about the sport coming up and wanting to do the right things. I got to meet, I was I had a kid on the Youth Pan Am team last year, and got to meet some coaches on there that I never met before. You know, a couple of them down in Florida that were super nice guys that seemed to have a big passion for the sport and doing the right things and wanting to develop their athletes. And I think I'll always say, like, I think the best coaches aren't the ones that you're seeing all over social media for the most part. Not that the ones that you could see on there couldn't be good coaches, but I think, you know, I'm more interested on being on my gym floor and coaching my athletes and being here and working and developing programs and reviewing videos. I don't have time to do all the social media posts and everything like that.
Yeah.
But you know, for those people that do, at least they're getting the word of the sport out there. Right. Like, and there are some people that do a real nice job with real slick, you know, social media and Instagram and everything like that. And I mean, I guess it draws people to the sport and it draws people to their team. And if that helps to grow the sport in general, then, you know, I don't know if that's the worst thing. The problem is if people are going to those teams, a lot of times what you've seen over the years is athletes that switch coaches don't typically, to those type of clubs, don't typically develop the way that they were before. It tends to kind of hurt the athlete much more so, you know, and I can think of, you know, specific instances of that, of athletes that I've coached, of athletes that I've seen coached by other people where, you know, it's like, you know, and there was even one recently where I was having a conversation with another coach and we're just like, why would he go there? Like from a cultural standpoint, like that just does not seem to be the right fit. Like, you know, where he was, and I'm obviously going to be very vague here, but like he was his coach's best athlete. So his coach, which was a very, you know, we'll just say has been in the sport for a long time and has done in my opinion, a really great job. But it was like the thing, like, you know, you were his best athlete. So like he gave you all of his attention. Like that was going to be, you were going to be the focus for him. And instead they went to a team where there were several people on that team that were beyond them and where the coach's focus was, you know, he would maybe be, you know, the 7th or 8th or 10th best guy on that team. Whereas on the team that he was in, he was number 1. So now what wound up happening with there is he left that team and came back to his coach, his original coach, which I think was a good thing for him. But it was just interesting to see like what makes me wonder what makes an athlete make a move, as opposed to, you know, having a conversation with your coach sometimes.
I have a question for you guys real quick about this. Sorry, Max, but this is interesting. Do you guys think, like what you just mentioned, Walt? So like we're always told, I mean, I'll look at it from a business standpoint, like if you're the smartest or the most successful in a room, go to a bigger room or like whatever it is. So like if you're the best athlete on a team, do you think there is ever an argument to move to a team where you're not the best athlete, or should you remain in that position?
Well, what if you're Olivia Reeves?
Yeah.
You know, so, and
well, then you become the coach.
Yeah.
You're in charge now.
But I would say that, you know, like obviously with the age old coaching answer is it depends, you know, like an example that I'll give that I know a little bit about is we'll say like Kendrick Ferris, right? Yeah. So Kendrick Ferris, for those that aren't aware, because I know weightlifting fans come and go pretty quick. He's a 3-time Olympian.
21 years old.
Yeah. He's a 3-time Olympian for the United States. And Kendrick, you know, had a tight bond and relationship with his coach, Dr. Kyle Pierce. And Kyle is a phenomenal coach, right? Like I got tons of respect for him. He has done so much in this sport and has just been tremendous. But Kendrick was, I mean, he might be not the best example because he would find it'd be tough for him to find a room where there was a lot of people stronger than him in it. But the big thing there was I think he had that relationship with his coach where he trusted his coach. And I wonder if he would have made a switch to a bigger team or something like that, if that coach would have been able to form that bond with him and keep him in the gym and keep him moving in the right direction. And Kyle did, and he masterfully did that, kept him going in the right direction, kept him engaged. And I mean, it paid off. And like I said, being a 3-time Olympian, multiple time, you know, like record holder within the US and has put up tremendous numbers. But I think a big part of that was that he had that relationship that kept him coming back to the gym and kept him showing up. And you can make a change to a bigger team, but then that room is not going to be conducive to what's healthy for you from a development standpoint, right? So if you're in a room where let's say you're, you know, the best lifter in the room, but you got other people there that are cheering for you and trying to catch you, and pushing you. I mean, and then you switch to a bigger team, and then you got people that are jealous of you and, not necessarily have your best interest at heart. I mean, that's not going to be a better room for you. You're better off staying with a supportive team that's rooting for you, that's working with you, that's talking with you, that's helping you. And I mean, that's the whole team concept. And it's an individual sport, weightlifting is. But I think people really do undervalue how important that team and that environment is that you're training in and day out. And also, your investment from your coach, right? So if your coach is not going to be invested in you as much because they have whatever 150, 200 athletes, you're better off being with a coach that can manage the load that they have and give you the attention that you need in order to continue to develop.
Yeah. How much do you think like the grass is always greener and all of social media and just like people kind of get into their head that like I don't even think it's intentional, but like, oh man, like that's going well over there. And I had a bad week or a bad month and I just need to do something different. And it's like almost like a cultural thing in the US that like there's always choices. There's an infinite amount of choices and like it's just change it up, do something different. How much do you think that kind of just bleeds into it and has a negative effect? Kind of not even like coaches, not even people leaving for any reason, but just like thinking that that's better over there because they do XYZ thing, or that guy's looking really good. I should try something else. Do you think that's
Well,
something you're fighting against as a coach or
well, I mean, I guess in certain times, yeah, sure you will. I do have an athlete once that left me to go to another team, and I can definitely understand the allure of going to a team where you're going to have all these great training partners and so on and so forth. This athlete, she was a national champion under me. She was an international athlete under me, and she went to another team where she could, because she felt like what they were doing over there, they had multiple Olympians on the team and so on and so forth. And I mean, this was not a poaching situation. The coach called me. I talked to them about it. It was very pleasant, good stuff. And then about 6 months later, she called me back on the phone and she was like, "Hey, would you take me back? Because, if you wouldn't take me back, I'm just going to stay where I'm at. But if you would take me back, I want to leave and come back to you." And in that conversation, she said, "Well, I found out why the grass is always greener on the other side." And I said, "Why is that?" And she said, "Because it's full of shit." So that's one of the things to kind of, pay attention to. And, we've had some athletes that have left and have come back saying that they were made a lot of promises by other coaches that just weren't fulfilled, weren't lived up to. And, I think there are coaches that, see a talent and they're trying to, allure it over to their team as opposed
yeah.
to doing what's best for the athlete, and really, I guess, like, like the coaches that I'm closest with and have the best relationships with, I think we're very athlete centric with our focus. I can think of one specific example personally where I had a very high level athlete on an international trip talk to me about wanting to leave their coach and like basically like wanting like talking to me like almost like it was like an interview type consideration of moving to me is kind of how it was kind of maybe started there. And I asked this athlete pointed questions about what was the issue with their coach and found out that really what I felt it was a communication breakdown. It was an athlete had some changes in their life as they were growing and getting to different stages in their life, and then the coach had some challenges with that. So I sat down with the coach and I spoke with the coach, and without telling them what the athlete said, the coach said, the athlete isn't communicating with me well.
Yeah.
So the coach, both of them felt like the other one wasn't communicating with them well. So I kind of, encouraged both of them to have some dialogue and to converse within themselves better. That athlete is still with that coach to this day, which I'm happy to say. But I think a lot of those other type of coaches that are, like you said, like slick with Instagram and wonder, I don't think they're thinking about those things. I think they're thinking more what's best for me and not what's best for the athlete long term. And they're not encouraging, conversation between coaches and athletes. They're like, "Oh, let me get them over here." So, there is a time for an athlete to leave a coach. Athletes can outgrow coaches. An athlete-coach relationship can become toxic. And sometimes it just runs its course. So there are absolutely times where athletes should move on and seek something that's going to be a better fit for them culturally or from a commitment standpoint. But, I think with a lot of these things, the first thing that we got to encourage is conversation and discussion with the athlete and a coach. And sometimes, when you have that conversation, they'll sit down there and they'll decide, okay, hey, both of us agree it's time for us to move on. What you're asking for is not something that I can provide. and, and I can help you to maybe even find somebody that's more aligned with what you're looking for, what you need at this point in your career.
Definitely. Yeah. It's funny, this topic, because yesterday one of my coaches came out to me and let me know one of his athletes is switching coaches, someone we'd coached for 5 years who was just like off the street, never did powerlifting, and podiumed at nationals last year. And it's the same thing. It's like they just want to change it up, get a new perspective. And it's like I had to talk him off the ledge and just be like, yeah, like they stayed with you for 5 years. Like that's pretty legit. Let's
Yeah.
celebrate that win, because a lot of in powerlifting specifically, like it's maybe 2 years you keep a client like long term, and usually they churn. And so I was like, and you've made so much progress. But it is interesting. And I told him the same thing. It's like they might go over there and see what's going on and come back. And it's just part of it. And so, but if we get like weird about it or snaky or angry, like it's never going to leave a good impression, and people are going to talk about that. And so it's just interesting that we're talking about this today, because it's so recent for me. Real quick, I want to move on to the men versus women in USAW. So you've listened to some of our other podcasts. A lot of coaches we've talked with always talk about how the women are so much stronger in USAW and performing better internationally for USAW in the USA. What is your hot take, because you disagree?
Well, and not only with that, what they're necessarily with what they're doing, right? Because what they're doing is phenomenal. Like, I mean, I don't want to take anything away from what our women are doing, but I listened to a couple of your guys' podcasts where this topic did come up. Specifically when we're talking about, there's a couple of different points with it, specifically when we're talking about the youth athletes, because I've heard a lot of things talking about how, well, we're filling out these women's teams, but the boys just aren't at the same level. They're not doing it. And I think one of the factors that we're not taking into account is natural testosterone, right? So like the numbers that a 16-year-old boy does compared to a 27-year-old man, there is a bigger jump there than what a 16-year-old girl does to a 26-year-old woman does, right? Because that boy is going to have testosterone at much higher levels than that woman for the next 10 years. So when we're looking at the A and the B standards that USAW has put out, right now, I really do feel like, honestly, that it is much more difficult for a younger athlete, a youth athlete, and even a junior athlete to compete against men that are fully developed than it is for the women's side to do that. So when we're getting the criticism that the youth isn't as deep or the youth men aren't working as hard, I don't think that that's fair. I think that they're compared to a higher standard just due to the differences, the biological differences between men and female, males and females. I think also, like, and again, I don't want to discredit what our women are doing, but I think like when we're looking at the women's sport, there's a lot of countries that are that send men's teams still in this world that don't send a women's team, like a example being Iran, right? So like if you take all those countries that are sending, full teams, and if we're going to assume that those teams would be as good as their counterparts on the men's side, that's going to knock some of our women down a couple notches, just like it knocks our men down a couple notches, right? So like if you look at like just even the last squad, we had a lot of guys that were close to breaking into the top 10, that didn't quite crack into it. So we didn't send a full team. But on the women's side, we did send a full team. And then we had some extras, right? So I mean, I think that the women are outpacing the men overall, but I think that I don't really believe that the discrepancy is as big as what some people try to tend it to be. And I don't think that we're viewing it as the way that we should, as they are kind of two different, I don't want to say sports, but two different leagues, right? So you have one league that's got a much larger pool of countries and athletes that are competing in it. And then you have a barrier on top of that when it comes to the A and the B standards that's much more difficult for, in my opinion, for a youth male to hit than it is for a youth female to hit. So, I think that those things need to be taken into consideration, because it is kind of interesting when we're sending like a full women's youth team and we're only sending like 2 or 3 guys, right? And the guys that we tend to send also tend to be the guys that are lighter weight classes, right? Because the bigger kids, they need that testosterone in their system for longer to compare themselves to a bigger athlete, right? So if we're going to be comparing people like a super to Lasha on the men's side, that's going to be a lot more difficult than what it would be on the women's side or with a smaller athlete to do that, because it takes a while to grow to be that big. And then it takes a while to strengthen at that size, right? So we all know you can get big, but it takes longer to get strong as well, right? So those are two different things. So in order to strengthen that hypertrophy does take some time and some longer athletic development there. So again, don't want to take anything away from the women. They're killing it. They're crushing it. They're doing good. They're doing great. But I just like, I want to stand up for my boys because I see these kids and they're working hard. And I mean, I even heard, I don't remember who it was, but I heard somebody just say that the men, that the men aren't working as hard and the men are lazier than the women. And I don't think that there's anything further from the truth. I think we got guys that are busting their humps. I know Max spoke about on a different podcast, which again, I agree with him 100%, is that, you know, a lot of our male athletes also have different avenues that they can pursue where there's going to be, you know, better financial rewards or scholarship money and things like that. You know, like for a lot of our high level super athletic guys, they're going to go play maybe college football or something like that before, you know, going to weightlifting. And then they come to us afterwards, right? And we have two great examples of that right now. Well, I could think of three, but I mean, like we can look at like, you know, Aaron Williams, who was a college football player. That after he was done, he comes and he's lighting it up in that heavyweight division. You could take a look at Colby Ferguson, who is just insane, right? And doing a phenomenal job as well. But he played football at the Citadel, and I know he recently retired. But you could look at Wes Kitts, who was also a college football player, and then after his days were done playing college football, then he transitioned into a weightlifter. So, you know, like again, I just think they're like what Matt said. There's more options for guys that give them greater rewards when they're in that 16 to 22 range than what there is that maybe for as many women. So it keeps more women in the sport, and the ones that are doing it, again, I mean, they're doing phenomenal. I mean, you take a look at,
Yeah.
you know, what Olivia's doing, you know, what Maddie's doing, you know, Jordan, Mary transitioned over from throwing, but we got some women and I mean, like we could go with some of the younger ones, the Katie Esteps and the Sophie Shafts and the Ella Nicholsons, and you know, we're deep and they're strong and they're doing phenomenal jobs. But I do think that our men get a bad rap.
Do you feel like it's a little bit more of a recruiting issue than it is, or like, do you feel like it seems like for women, it's a lot easier. There's just less friction and resistance to go from, say, high school athletics, or, you know, you're a talented athlete, but you're bigger, you know, you're not, or, you know, whatever, your body type doesn't fit into whatever sport options are there. And weightlifting is a great option. And it's kind of easier for women to go from that, or from CrossFit into lifting, or finish gymnastics when they're 16. So they're younger when they start weightlifting. Whereas men, it's like they might get out of high school football and they might all play college ball if they can. And so you kind of miss that. You have this gap where it's like, hey, at best, we're getting most of the talented guys a little later than we get the women. And we don't really have a great pipeline to like pull guys from football, you know, all the guys that can't get to D1 or that can't get to the NFL. Like, we're not capturing that well, versus it's just that more talented women come in, because there's probably equal amount of talented people. Do you feel like it's a pipeline thing, like a recruiting thing, or more just, you know, it's kind of a luck of the draw? Like, it's as lucky that we get an Olivia as we get a Colby.
Well, I mean, I think there's definitely a lot of validity to what you just said. I think the other thing is like, you know, the one thing that women do, I think we can all admit, is they mature a lot quicker than us, right? So I think maybe part of that is like maybe having being mature younger makes them realize that,
Right.
like, I mean, like I thought I was going to be a professional athlete till I was like 26, right? I held
I'm
on to
still
that dream
trying.
for
I'm still
a
on the way
long
there.
time.
I'm waiting for the callback from the Cowboys. I could probably make that team.
You probably make that roster. But yeah, so I think part of that is just like, you know, I think sometimes as guys, we want to like hold on to the dream of something bigger, even when we know that, like, even like, you know, like, well, I'm just going to grow 6 inches and gain, you know, I heard about Dennis Rodman growing 6 inches in a year. So I'm going to do that. That could be me, you know, like, so we hold on to these like real crazy things that might happen and might not happen. And maybe that does keep them out of the sport a little bit longer, or finding
Yeah.
something that's a better fit for them. I
Makes
think,
sense.
and then also with gymnastics, I think gymnastics kind of pushes kids out a lot younger, right? Like you get old in gymnastics a lot quicker than you get old in football. You get old in gymnastics a lot quicker than you get old in wrestling, you know? So I think that's another aspect of it. And so, but I think that there's a maturity aspect with that. I think there is the fact that like, like again, that there's more avenues for the guys, and to do things athletically. There's a lot more, like, I mean, I got kids on my team that have not only didn't make it to they didn't make it to the NFL, but they played in NFL Europe, they played in the CFL, they found other ways to do that, where with women, those secondary options are at this point much more limited. Like the WNBA's rosters are much smaller than the NBA's rosters. There's no G League for the WNBA. So if we're just going to like take a look at that sport, which does have some type of a developmental program for a women's league as well, there just isn't as many women in it, and there's not as much room for the women in that, right? So there's fewer of them. And if we're going to look at like football, I mean, I don't even know what you would compare it to on the women's side. Right. There's nothing there. Yeah. Throwers, they can switch over at any time. Like I think male throwers and female throwers have both transitioned over really well to the sport of weightlifting, obviously, with power generation that they do and the way that they train is very much in line with the way that we train. But yeah, I think there's a couple different elements that go into that play.
Definitely.
That makes sense.
Walt, when you and I chatted previously as well, we talked a little bit about like just funding, our own funding athletes getting to tournaments or to meets. When a reigning Pan Am champ has to self-fund worlds, what's broken in the system?
Everything. I mean, I like that one just doesn't make a lot of sense to me, right? I think that we have to be able to use some more discernment, and I mean. And I might have we obviously we're talking about Maddie Rogers, and I mean I might have some of this timeline a little bit off, but I believe if my memory is suiting me correctly, she bombed out at Worlds because she was injured and going full send to try to hit the total for.
I always like to say, please do allow me to serve you at a high. Then if you are not even a free subscriber to the Contrarian Catalyst, please do become a free. Again, if you are not even a free subscriber to the Contrarian Catalyst, please do become a free subscriber.
And because of that, and the way that they didn't, and she didn't know what the NTP was at that time. She didn't know what so she wasn't informed that this is what you're going to have to do in order to be able to maintain your stipend, what you're going to have to do in order to maintain funding. So she was going under the assumption that this is how we've always done it. And, I can come back. If I make that team, I'm going to be good to go. So she makes the Pan Am team and she has to be self-funded for it. And she goes out there and she freaking wins it.
As well, for the
because of the time periods and the way that they have it, she's not funded for the world team. Personally, I think that anybody that makes a senior world team should be funded. I think that anybody that makes a senior Pan Am team should be funded. I don't think that there's any ifs, ands, or buts about that. I just think that if you make one of those teams that USA Weightlifting needs to, I mean, we need to budget that we're going to have 8 men and 8 women for these events. And that's it. And I don't care what your previous thing is, because what you're doing is you're making that barrier of entry for people so incredibly high. So, whether you're, a Colby Ferguson that's coming up and making his first international team, you're telling me that there's no way for him to be funded on his first team. He's got to go to that first team and pay for himself and then post the total in order to get on that team. I just think that there is something within that system that is broken when you have, again, a senior world team that isn't fully funded. Now, if you don't want to fund the coaches all the way around, okay, cool. You only want to fund the coaches. So these athletes that have made the NTT program, absolutely. The coaches can be self-funded. Coaches can figure that out. We can do things for that until the athlete gets to the level and has done what they needed to do in order to get their coach to be funded as well. But so like in Maddie's instance, if Amy wasn't funded, I'd be okay with that, right? Because she didn't do the other things. I'm sure Amy would be fine with that as well. I mean, she'd be like, okay, pay for Amy. Pay for Maddie. I'll pay for myself. I'll figure that part out. But I think the defending Pan Am champion should be funded to go to the World Championships. I think we would want them to be. What happens if Maddie were to say, hey, look, I don't have the money to do it this year and I'm not going to? I mean, that could hurt us later on when it comes to points. Well, I guess they don't really do points anymore, but it can hurt us with rankings and team placement and stuff like that. So I think it's definitely something that we missed that needs to have an amendment to it to take care of these athletes and the ones that are going to come up. And we always have one that comes up, whether, here recently, I mean, the two on the women's side that I've been real impressed with are Sophie Shaft and Ella Nicholson. Right now, I know that they kind of came in the junior year through the juniors and so on and so forth. But if we get one of those kids coming in as a junior again and they're not funded, well, then they might have to choose. Like, I can't go to junior Pan Ams and junior Worlds. I can only do one or the other, right? Or I can't do any of them. So we need to be funding our best and our brightest. And it can't be, in my opinion, it can't be where we're going to risk having, our top athletes, I don't even know what Maddie is on the world team ranking, but like, she can't be further down than third or fourth, right? And having her not funded, I think is a mistake. And I think it's sending the wrong message to the population.
If Walt had a magic wand and he's now in charge of, the greater USAW sort of structure, what would you do? Like, not necessarily specifics, but like, what would you think is like, hey, this is the strategy. This is what we got to focus on, more in particular to the team we have, not necessarily recruiting and that stuff, but like, yeah, what would you say is like, this is just the universally best way according to Walt?
So, boy, so the first thing I would do is I'd hire a bunch of people that were smarter than me, to help point me in the right direction.
Put my application in right now.
Hey, it will be taken it would be taken very seriously. There would be immense consideration given to that resume for absolute certain. But yeah, I mean, that's, I would want to surround myself not with people that necessarily just, and I'm not saying this is what the case is now. I'm just saying I would want dissenting opinions. I'd want people that, had different ideas. And I'd want people that, for me, I would want to put people in there that have a coaching tenure and a history in the sport that shows that they're in it for the right reasons, right? That they love the sport and do that. Now, I feel like, what we did, that we seem to have kind of gotten away from a little bit here is that long-term athletic development, right? And I think we're reaping the rewards with it right now when we see what's going on with Hamp, when we see what's going on with Olivia, right? So, and now with them cutting funding for youth and juniors, I feel like that could potentially do something that pushes some of these kids out of the sport at a younger age, where they make the teams, but families can't afford to go and so on and so forth. I would definitely bring back funding to the athletes, and definitely want to make sure that we're funding the youth and the junior teams. Now, some of these smaller teams that we've had after because it was the 2020 quad when they had the gold, silver, and bronze events, and there was 1 million of those smaller events. If we want to make those all self-funded, I'm okay with that. But if you're at a continental or a world championship at any level, I feel like you need to be a funded athlete. Like we could figure out a way to pay for that athlete to get there. And, I think our high performance staff is like, if the coach can't go, our high performance staff is absolutely capable of running that athlete for them. If the coach can't make it for a reason, I would trust our high performance staff to count for an athlete of mine if I couldn't make it, for sure. And make sure that they were in a good mental state and doing the right things. But making these kids pay for that stuff, that wouldn't have to be number one on my list, is making sure that our athletes are funded. I would, I know our stipends were also reduced. I haven't seen the books. So I know that the CEO that we have, he's got a financial background. So I'm sure that when he's looking at things, he's trying to make that budget right. And I respect that. I know that the budget is public, domain, but I haven't looked at it and broken it down. And I'm sure he's got his reasons, and he's trying to get us on the right track with things. We got these sponsorships coming in. We have these, they're asking for donations all the time. We're running these meets. The priority has to be, funding those high performance kids if we're going to continue to perform at that high level. I think the other thing that would be a huge focus of mine would be coach development. I don't think we do,
which is going to be my next segment. So go into it. Yes, do it.
Yeah. I don't think we do nearly enough to help develop, or anything to help develop, coaches within this country. They kind of leave it to the coaches to kind of figure it out themselves. Now, I am in the education department as an instructor. I teach the level 1s and the level 2s. I think that what we have in that level 1 and in that level 2, I think that they're fantastic. I think that they're a ton of great information over the course of 2 days, a day and a half for the level 1, 2 days for the level 2. I think they're awesome. Giving that information and having no real follow-up or no way to actually help develop coaches after that is a problem. There needs to be like opportunities for apprenticeship. There needs to be opportunities for communication. And I know USA Weightlifting tried to do some things before, but I think that the way that they approached it was misguided. I think it had the right intention, but I don't think it was implemented well. And I think they tried to do these like different camps. I think you can do things like during Nationals Week, right? So Nationals Week, a lot of coaches are going to have downtime because you got to be out there so long, especially if you got a team like mine where you have youth, juniors, U23, U25, and seniors. I'm there for, 10, 11 days in Colorado Springs. And I know that there's other coaches as well that are out there for a long time that, they might have, like a couple youth kids, maybe one or two junior kids and one or two senior guys or kids. So like in there has to be opportunities for us to sit down with coaches and work on coaching education without making it a separate trip. I think that's a perfect part, a perfect way, a perfect avenue to start getting like some senior level coaches conversing with some of these younger coaches and helping develop them. I've been really impressed with a lot of our young coaches that I've run into and how they ask questions and how they want to learn. I have a coaching mentorship membership for coaches that want to learn, where we do calls, we go over video breakdowns, we go over programming, and I help them to understand, as best as I can. And then they can also shadow me, or I can work with them with their athletes at a meet when I'm going to be there, where it fits within the schedule with opposing my athletes, right? If I have one of my athletes, I can't go coach yours too. But I mean, I can be there and kind of run the numbers with you and kind of show you, how we do that. So, but there's a lot of we spent a lot of money from USA Weightlifting's perspective. I don't know how much, but we spent a lot of money with these coaching scholarships. And I coached a lot of the people that got, I taught a lot of those courses. But I think the problem is like, okay, we get them to level one now, right? And there has to be something that keeps them engaged and keeps them moving and keeps them growing in order to get to that next level. And I know that we have a bunch of different modules online, but if we're going to be realistic, I don't think a lot of people are going to go sit there and just click through a bunch of slides all the time in order to try to do that. I think having those opportunities to talk to people that have done it, to compare notes, to pick each other's brain, not only is good for the young athletes, but it's good for the more experienced coaches as well. Because, we get to hear things thought about from a different background or a different perspective. And, getting questions that force me to think critically, I think just help me to be a better coach. And I get those in the level ones and the level twos. And, it's interesting when you do, but I think we need to help facilitate that. So that would be another thing that I would be very focused on, is a continuing education development of these coaches.
Yeah. Do you feel like the incentive structure doesn't exist? Like I always question myself a lot of times, which is, kind of going back even to the internet stuff. You've got a lot of these, like you can make a lot of money as a coach online if you focus 80% on business, 20% on the actual coaching athletes to a high level. And so there's a ton of incentive there. And the skills you pick up when you have the incentive are going to benefit you for the outcome, right? So if you need to get better at marketing, you're going to learn how to market. Where the incentive for being a good coach is almost like there's the reward is only intrinsic, right? It's like only what you really get out of it, in the sense like I feel great about myself and this, and that's a huge thing. Where with like USAW or any organization, there's almost like a misaligned, or do you think there's a misaligned incentive structure for people being good at weightlifting and people being good coaches? And like, it's kind of like, I'm not saying that the coaches should earn money or something, but it's kind of a funny thing where it's like coaches are sort of in weightlifting expected to like deliver somebody to the Olympics. And then it's like, you almost don't even get much out of that, like outside of being, you can put that on your name.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you can go to Starbucks and, that plus $7 gets you a small coffee, at least in the Bay Area. So, it's like, you don't really get much, like there's no monetary reward. There's no real accolade that really builds it up. And so it's easy, I can see, for coaches to kind of move over to be like, you know what, like why bother continuing to become a better coach when I'm good enough to coach a large group of people and build a gym or build a community and just work on that and make money and, leave the other stuff to the top people. Do you think, the question I have is like, do you think that USAW doesn't incentivize people the right way to get the thing they want? They're incentivizing people in some way, but the result they get is what they have right now. Is
Well,
there a better way, do you think, they could incentivize people to become good coaches?
absolutely, but I don't think that's what their goal is, right?
Right.
Like, I mean, if we're honestly looking at it, I think USA Weightlifting's goal is to win medals at the highest level. I don't think I think USA Weightlifting benefits tremendously from the goodwill and the hard work of people that love the sport. And if those people, like myself, like left the sport, all of us did en masse, and USA Weightlifting would crumble. It's the same thing with the
Right.
TOs, right? Like there's a massive amount of TOs that spend their own money and they travel out to these meets. They volunteer their time. I mean, we feed them good, and they got some new room sharing, so they've improved some of the things with that. But I mean, again, this is not. These are people that are giving up time of their life for something that they're passionate about, for community, for that. And I think it's the same thing with coaches. I don't think there really are any incentives in place to master yourself as coaches. I mean, there's a lot of these coaches that you're talking about on the internet that I listen to some of their stuff because it gets sent to me, and it's absolutely ridiculous. It's like
Right.
it to me, like, and again, I'm not going to mention any name, but I mean, like, I cannot believe how much they don't know. And they just say things that are, the only word I could put is dumb, confidently. And other people just don't realize how dumb what they're saying is. But there are like specific examples I can think of in my mind where it's like, that's just wrong. Tell me you don't know biomechanics without telling me you don't know biomechanics. Tell me you don't know how to coach in a meet without meet coach without telling me you don't know how to meet coach. Tell me you don't understand what muscles you use in an exercise without telling me that you don't know what muscles to use in an exercise. It's like telling me like, this is a close to, but not exact example, but tell me that you're going to fix somebody's jerk with a bent over row, right? Like, it just that doesn't align. That's not how that works. So, but they put it out there. They put it real confidently. It draws people into them. And yeah, I think that those people do run the business, and they also don't retain athletes very well, right? Like, so there's a lot of churn on those teams, and so their goal, what it winds up becoming for them, is just kind of a cyclical thing of, I got to get new toys, because I constantly have toys that are leaving, because I'm not fulfilling what I am. And I think that those people eventually, the reputation gets out and they don't last, right? But they can last for a while, but they don't last like forever, right? They don't last, and they don't wind up becoming an old hat unless they adapt and they change and they grow. But you get into that vicious cycle, and that's all that becomes for them, is it's running a business and it's churning. Where, I have so many athletes that have been with me 8, 9, 10 plus years, where when you're saying like in powerlifting, the average is 2 years. I'm like, wow, I would hate that. I've officiated the weddings of 7 of my athletes, and I got 3 more on the books. I got athletes whose kids call me Grandpa Walt or Opa or other things like that, which, it's because we build these long-term relationships, because they know I give a crap and they know that I truly do love them and care about them. So, like those coaches that are focused the other way, they're not going to have that. So, but yeah, when you're talking about that infrastructure and everything else, and what you get, those good feelings. I mean, like those good feelings, I kind of, that large part of that is my why as to why I do this, right? Because I feel like I'm able to make an impact. And when I'm looking at life, I look at it that way as well. It's like, what impact can I help to make? What can I teach people through sport, through sport, through weightlifting? You can learn so many life lessons that will make people better spouses, better parents, better workers, and their thing. There's so few people that are ever going to be able to make a living within the sport long term. So it's like, how do I impact people on a grander scale with the sport being my tool in order to get through to them and get them to develop these other traits, right? We learned about perseverance. We learned about pushing through. We learned about fighting through pain. We learned about disappointment and rebounding from it, and persistence. We learned not everything goes the way that we're supposed to, that it's supposed to, or the way that we want it to, but we persevere anyway, right? So there's so many great, valuable things that we learn through sport, and we learn through strength, that persevere with, like I said, family, being a better husband, a better wife, a better father, a better mother, a better friend, a better son, a better daughter, like all these things that we learn through the sport. And it's like, I think a lot of times we don't even realize it till later. Like, they're like, oh, well, shit, like all these battles and all these things that I went through, they prepared me for this. And, there's like that old saying is, the best way to learn how to do hard things is to do hard things. well, this is some hard shit, whether it's powerlifting or weightlifting or, any sport, especially like a strength sport where, we're pushing through, we're pushing through pain. We're showing up when we don't want to, we're showing, like, hey, I want a day off, but I got to do this. I've done this much tonnage this week. I need a little bit of a break. When's that? But like, I still got to, I don't want to today, man. I don't want to. I just want to go home, sit on the couch and pet my dog, but I'm going to, and those type of things, those qualities that get developed in this, wind up helping people in all different aspects of their life. So,
Definitely.
Like, again, like, so to me, that's that, and then that's worth quite a bit, and, my previous career, I owned an executive search firm and I made a lot more money, which is allowed me to do what I'm doing now. Right. But there was like no relationship building and there was nothing there that was something that lasted and gave me that rewarding feeling. So switching over to this, I believe that in everybody's life, we have different periods for different things. Right. So like, I had a talk with Spencer Arnold at one point where he was talking about, like, we were talking about his team and my team and things like that. And I was like, well, Spencer, what you have to understand, and it was a very pleasant conversation. I mean, this was not like, I've always had pleasant conversations with Spencer, but it was, I told him, I was like, like, you are in a different stage than I am. Like, you're in empire building mode, right? You want to build this huge team. You want to have all these top performing athletes. You want to do all that. And that's wonderful. And that's good. And USA Weightlifting needs that in it. Right. But I'm in legacy building mode, right? Where for me, it's more about what are the ripples that I'm being able to cast out there through the sport. So I'm just looking at it differently than you are, where you like, I mean, like, he was in the churn, which might've been part of what burnt him out. Right. It was like, I got to get this athlete to here. I got to get to this guy. And he wasn't like necessarily enjoying the whole process, or it became, and I'm speaking for him now. He did not say this, but like, I'm just, I haven't spoken. I've offered to speak with him since he left the sport, but we just haven't had the time to do that. But I think like for him, he felt like he was missing out on he's got young kids, felt like he was missing out on some of their development and, being and running through 2 quads where you have Olympians in both of them. There is a lot of travel, a lot of time away from home. And it's rough on you, even as a coach. Right. So, I'm glad that he was able to do it on his own and just step back and focus on other things. But, yeah, again, his focus was a little bit different than what mine is. Right. And I think mine leads to more longevity and will help keep me in the sport for a longer period of time.
Definitely. Well, Walt, dude, we really appreciate having you on, man. I didn't even get to dig into the template versus individualization stuff, but we're going to schedule another podcast for sure and dig into some of that stuff eventually. So, appreciate your time. Thank you so much for being with us today. I'm excited to launch this one, man.
Yeah,
absolutely. It was fun.
If I learned anything, it's that if you want to get married, you got to train with Walt. He's got seven under his belt. That's the place to go.
Absolutely.
Cool.
All right.
Good talking to you.